In 1951, a factory foreman in Akron, Ohio, fed his wife and 4 children breakfast every single morning on less than 12 cents. Not 12 cents each, 12 cents total. His oldest daughter remembered it 60 years later. She said they never felt poor at breakfast. They felt fed. Number 7 on this list was once served in every school cafeteria, every diner, and every farmhouse kitchen from Maine to California. It has almost completely disappeared. Number 19 costs less than 30 cents and takes 4 minutes. Number 3 was the meal that sent miners into the earth, soldiers into the field, and factory workers into the noise for 12 hours straight. These 25 breakfasts kept working America going through the hardest decades this country ever saw. Then we got comfortable, and we threw them away. Hit the subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten poor man breakfasts from the 1950s that no one makes anymore. Number 25, cornmeal mush. A pot of boiling water, a slow pour of cornmeal, a wooden spoon, and 20 minutes. That was breakfast for millions of families who could not afford store-bought cereal and who would not have trusted it anyway. It was served in a bowl with molasses drizzled on top, or a pat of lard melted through the center. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal cost 19 cents in 1952, and it lasted 2 weeks of breakfasts. The leftover mush went into a loaf pan overnight, then got sliced and fried in the morning into something crispier, darker, and better than the original. 1 pot, 2 breakfasts. Pennies total. Bacon grease in a cast iron skillet. A spoonful of flour browned to the color of a paper bag. Then a can of whole tomatoes crushed in by hand. Salt, pepper, a pinch of sugar. Simmered thick and poured over split biscuits. The tomatoes gave it an acid brightness that cut through the richness of the lard beneath. A can of tomatoes cost 12 cents in 1955. This was breakfast across Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi on nearly every weekday morning, except Sunday. On Sunday, families had cream gravy, and Monday through Saturday they had this. It has almost entirely disappeared. Nobody wrote it down because everyone already knew how to make it. Number 23, bread and milk. A bowl, a few slices of day-old white bread torn into rough pieces, warm milk poured over the top, and sometimes a pinch of sugar. That was supper in homes across Tennessee and Kentucky when the money ran out. But it was also breakfast. Children ate it before school without knowing it was poverty food because everyone around them was eating the same thing. A loaf of bread cost 16 cents in 1952. A quart of milk was 21 cents. For a family of 6, this was breakfast for under 50 cents. No one photographs it. In 1,000 old farmhouses, it was the taste of getting through another morning. Bacon was for families who could afford it. Salt pork was for everyone else. Thick slices of cured fatback were rendered slowly in a cast iron skillet. 2 eggs were cracked into the grease and basted until the whites set. The salt from the pork seasoned everything in the pan. Bread was torn into pieces and dragged through the drippings until the skillet was clean. A pound of salt pork cost 12 cents in the early 1950s and lasted a week of breakfasts. Men who worked in mines and factories ate this before dawn, not because it was pleasant, but because it stuck. It delivered what hard physical labor demanded and kept them going until noon without complaint. Number 21st, crackers and milk. Saltines broken into a glass of cold milk and eaten with a spoon. That was the unofficial breakfast of children across the rural South and Midwest on mornings when there was nothing left to cook. A box of saltines ran about a dime. The milk was already in the icebox. The crackers went in first, the milk came after, and you ate fast before they turned to paste. Oral histories from the era speak of it with surprising warmth. It was simple, reliable. and theirs. The children who ate it grew up to feed their own children cereal in bright boxes. They never looked back. But this was still breakfast. The kind that asked nothing of you except a bowl and a spoon. Number 20. Fried potatoes and onions. This requires a clarification. Fried potatoes in 1953 were not a side dish. They were breakfast. Raw potatoes sliced thin and a yellow onion in rings were cooked low and slow in bacon grease for 25 minutes until the edges crisped and the onions turned sweet and soft. Potatoes cost about $3 for a 50-pound bag. The bacon grease was saved in a tin can on the back of the stove and never thrown away. Children ate seconds without being asked. Fathers asked about thirds. For families who had this every Wednesday morning, it was one of the best things they ate all week. Not a consolation breakfast. The real thing. Pattern break, 1 of 3. Here is something the morning food industry does not want you to think about. Every breakfast on this list required 1 pan, 1 burner, and ingredients that cost less than a single coffee drink. None of them needed a machine, a subscription box, or a food scientist to design them. They were designed by mothers doing math at 5 in the morning. How many eggs do we have? How long until payday? Who needs the most today? The strongest person at the table got the biggest plate. The children got fed before the parents sat down. That was the system. It was not pretty. It worked perfectly. Number 19. Creamed chipped beef on toast. The military called it something unprintable. Civilians called it SOS. Thin slices of dried salted beef torn into strips, stirred into a thick white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, then poured over white toast. The saltiness of the beef seasoned the entire sauce without any extra effort. Every veteran who came home from Korea or World War II had eaten this on a base somewhere and brought the recipe home. It appeared on American breakfast tables throughout the 1950s and then vanished almost entirely. The glass jars of dried beef still exist on grocery store shelves. Most shoppers walk past them without recognition. Your grandfather would have known exactly what to do with one. Number 18. Oatmeal with bacon grease. Not the brown sugar version. The working class version. Oatmeal cooked in water with a pinch of salt, finished with a spoonful of bacon grease stirred through while still hot. The fat gave it a savory richness and kept hunger away until noon. A container of rolled oats cost 23 cents in 1954 and lasted 2 weeks. The bacon grease was free, already paid for by Sunday's bacon. Modern food culture rediscovered savory oatmeal about 15 years ago and started charging $12 a bowl at brunch restaurants. Working-class grandmothers were doing a simpler, more honest version of the same idea, decades before any food writer thought to notice. Number 17. Egg in a hole. A slice of bread had a round hole cut from the center with a drinking glass, and it was laid flat in a buttered skillet. An egg was cracked into the hole and cooked until the white set and the yolk stayed soft. The cut-out circle fried alongside it. Salt, pepper, done. This was the breakfast that used bread going stale and the last egg in the carton. Mothers made it when the pantry was almost empty, and they wanted to make a child feel like they were getting something special instead of something desperate. It has a dozen names depending on where you grew up. The name does not matter. It turned almost nothing into something a child would ask for by name. That was its genius. Number 16. Fried cornbread. Leftover cornbread from the night before was sliced thick and laid into a skillet with bacon grease until each side turned deep gold and the edges crisped into something almost crackling. A drizzle of molasses on top, or nothing at all. In the rural South and Appalachia, cornbread was baked nearly every night. Frying the leftovers in the morning was not a recipe, it was a reflex. The outside crisped, the inside stayed soft and dense. The molasses soaked in and caramelized against the heat. Nobody called it anything. It was just the cornbread from last night, and it was better than the fresh version had any right to be. Number 15. Ham bone hash. After the Sunday ham became soup and the soup was eaten, there was still meat left. Thin shreds of smoky ham pulled from the bone, mixed with diced cold potatoes and sliced onion, pressed flat into a hot skillet, and left untouched for 10 minutes until the bottom turned into a dark, unified crust. The hash was flipped in sections and pressed down again. A fried egg on top was the only flourish it ever needed. This was the breakfast that closed the loop on Sunday's dinner. Nothing wasted. In households that understood what hunger felt like, using every last piece of that ham was not thrift. It was respect. Slices of white bread toasted until golden, placed in a shallow bowl, and covered with warm milk seasoned with salt, and sometimes a scrape of butter. The toast softened slowly from the bottom up, turning from crisp to tender to almost dissolving. This was the sick person's breakfast, the elderly person's breakfast, the meal you made for someone who could not handle anything more demanding. Doctors in the 1940s and 50s recommended it for patients recovering from illness. It asked almost nothing of the person eating it. That was the point. Some mornings a person needs a meal that meets them exactly where they are. Number 13. Pork, liver, and onions. Sliced thin, soaked in cold water to draw out the bitterness, dredged in flour, and cooked 2 minutes aside in a hot skillet, while onions caramelized alongside. Done right, it was rich and dark at the edges, still faintly pink at the center. Butchers in 1950s America practically gave pork liver away because they had more than they knew what to do with. The nutrition was real. The cost was almost nothing. The knowledge of how to cook it so it did not taste terrible was everything. That knowledge is almost entirely gone. The nutrition did not go anywhere with it. Pattern break, 2 of 3. Here is the thing about cheap breakfast food that nobody says out loud. The ingredients on this list are the same ingredients they were in 1952. They are still cheap, and they are still nutritious. They are still sitting on the bottom shelves of every grocery store in America. What changed is not the food. What changed is us. We were sold the idea that a real breakfast comes in a box, requires a machine, and should take under 3 minutes. We bought that idea completely. The food that kept people going through winters and recessions, and the kinds of hardship most of us will never know, ended up forgotten on the bottom shelf. The bottom shelf is exactly where this channel lives. Number 12. Cornmeal pancakes. Not the fluffy buttermilk stack from the diner. These are flat, dense, slightly gritty cornmeal pancakes. A cup of cornmeal, a cup of flour, an egg, a splash of buttermilk, a pinch of salt, a spoonful of lard. Cooked in a dry cast iron skillet, they came out thin and golden, almost crisp at the edges, topped with sorghum molasses or apple butter. They did not rise like wheat pancakes. They lay flat, and were better for it. A substance that stayed with you through the morning in a way that light, fluffy pancakes never could. They were the pancake of the working poor and the frontier homestead. They were almost completely replaced by boxed mix that produced something paler and less interesting in every measurable way. Number 11. Bean soup for breakfast. This one surprises people. Beans for breakfast was not unusual in the 1950s across the rural South, Appalachia, and the Southwest. A pot of pintos, or navy beans left from the night before, reheated at dawn, eaten with cornbread or biscuits before work. The protein and fiber delivered sustained energy across a long physical morning in a way that nothing sweet could match. Farm workers and miners knew this without being able to explain the biochemistry. A pound of dried pinto beans cost 8 cents in 1953. Reheated with a splash of hot sauce and a wedge of cornbread alongside it, this was not a consolation prize. It was a real breakfast, the kind that made work possible. Number 10. Scrapple. This is the one that makes people flinch. Pork scraps, organ meat, and head meat simmered down and then mixed with cornmeal, buckwheat flour, sage, and thyme. It was poured into a loaf pan to set overnight, then sliced a 1/4 inch thick and fried in a skillet, until each side turned deep, mahogany and crisp, served alongside fried eggs with maple syrup or apple butter. In Lancaster County and the Delaware Valley, this was the breakfast that launched working men into fields and factories. A loaf cost 18 cents in the early 1950s, and it lasted a week. Today it survives at a handful of specialty butchers in Pennsylvania. Everywhere else, it is almost completely forgotten. In the South, grits were not a side dish. Stone-ground hominy grits cooked low and slow for 45 minutes until thick and creamy, finished with a large spoonful of rendered fatback stirred in at the end. A piece of fried fatback laid across the top, still sizzling. Skillet cornbread on the side. A 5-pound bag of grits cost about 15 cents in 1954. Fatback was practically free. Modern restaurants charge $15 for a bowl of shrimp and grits and act like they invented the concept. Working families in Georgia and South Carolina were eating grits with fat and salt and fried pork long before any food writer ever thought to notice what was in the bowl. Leftover cornmeal mush poured into a greased loaf pan and left to set cold overnight. In the morning, sliced into 1/2-inch planks, laid into a hot skillet with lard, and cooked without moving for 8 minutes until the bottom crust formed. Flipped carefully. 6 more minutes. The outside turned deep gold and crisp like a thin crouton coating. The inside stayed soft and dense and tasted of the corn. Served with molasses poured over the top. Families who made this were not inventing a recipe. They were closing a loop that started the night before and produced 2 entirely different breakfasts from a single pot of boiling water and a cup of cornmeal. Number 7. Creamed corn on toast. This was the one served everywhere: school cafeterias, hospital kitchens, church basements, farmhouse tables from Ohio to Oregon. A can of creamed corn was heated with a scrape of butter and a pinch of salt, then ladled thick and steaming over 2 slices of white toast. 5 minutes on a gas burner, 9 cents for the can in 1952. Children ate it without complaint because it was sweet and warm, and the toast turned almost custardy at the bottom of the bowl. Today it does not appear in a single vintage cookbook because it was too ordinary to write down. It just fed people, millions of people on millions of mornings, without a single recipe card. Canned hominy, drained and fried in bacon grease until the kernels puffed and blistered and turned golden at the edges. Then 2 eggs were cracked directly into the pan and scrambled together. The hominy added a chewy, almost meaty texture and stretched 2 eggs into a proper breakfast for 2 people. A can of hominy cost 12 cents in 1955. 2 eggs cost maybe 6 cents. The total breakfast came in under 20 cents. Native American cooking gave the nixtamalization technique to the continent centuries before canning existed. Grandmothers made it and taught it. Then we discovered avocado toast. Somewhere in that transition, hominy and eggs stopped making the journey from one generation to the next. Pattern break. 3 of 3. Here is what nobody says out loud about breakfast in America. Half the people who skip breakfast are not intermittent fasting or watching their macros. They are skipping it because breakfast food got expensive. Eggs doubled in price. Cereal is $5 a box. Bacon is not something you buy without thinking about it anymore. The meals on this list were designed for exactly this moment. Not because someone planned it, because necessity already solved this problem 70 years ago. A bag of cornmeal, a container of oats, a box of saltines, a jar of molasses. Under $5. That is a week of breakfasts. That is the knowledge we threw away when we decided we were too comfortable to need it. We are not too comfortable anymore. Number 5. Potato soup for breakfast. On farms across the rural South and the Ozarks, the line between meals was thinner than food culture admits. A pot of potato soup made the night before, with diced potatoes, fatback, an onion, salt, and a splash of evaporated milk, was reheated at dawn and eaten before the day's work began. A wedge of cornbread was torn into pieces and dragged through the broth until the bowl was clean. These families were not thinking about breakfast categories. They were thinking about getting everyone to the table before the light changed. They did it every morning. They did it well. Number 4. Depression cake for breakfast. Depression cake used no eggs, no butter, and no milk because those things were either rationed or unaffordable. It used flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, vinegar, oil, and water. It was mixed directly in the pan it baked in, so there was nothing extra to wash. Dense, dark, and surprisingly moist. Families who survived the Depression carried the recipe into the 1950s, not because they were still poor, but because the cake was good and the habit was hard to break. It was sliced cold the morning after baking and eaten with a glass of milk. It cost under 30 cents for the whole cake, serving a family of 6 for 2 mornings. The pantry had the answer every time. Number 3. Oatmeal with lard and salt. Strip away everything modern, and this is what you have. Oatmeal made from rolled oats cooked in water, a spoonful of lard stirred in while still hot, salt. Nothing else. This was the breakfast of miners going underground, soldiers going to the field, and factory workers going to the line at 5:30 in the morning. The lard provided the fat calories that hard physical labor burns first. The oatmeal provided the slow starch that kept a person going through 4 hours of work. The salt replaced what sweat took out. A container of rolled oats cost 23 cents and lasted 2 weeks. This breakfast built the American working class. That is not a metaphor. The men who built the tunnels and laid the rails ate this before they went to work. Number 2. Biscuits and sorghum molasses. Not the restaurant biscuit, the plain biscuit. Flour, lard, salt, buttermilk. Worked quickly so the fat stayed cold, and baked until the tops turned gold. They were split open while still warm. A pour of dark sorghum molasses over both halves, soaked into the cut face and pooled in the split. Dark, slightly bitter at the edge of sweet. A gallon of sorghum molasses cost about $1 in 1953 and lasted 2 months of breakfasts. This was breakfast across the rural South, the Ozarks, and Appalachia, on more mornings than anyone counted. Simple enough to make half asleep. Good enough to remember 60 years later. Most people who ate it are gone now. The recipe takes 15 minutes. It is not gone yet. Number 1. Leftover beans and cornbread. Here is where we land. Leftover beans. Cold cornbread. Reheated together in the same pot from the night before, eaten before dawn at a kitchen table that used to seat 6. This is the breakfast that appears in every American oral history of working poverty from the Great Depression through the post-war years. In Appalachian mining towns, in Dust Bowl farm kitchens, in the sharecropper cabins of the Mississippi Delta. Leftover beans, cold cornbread. 8 minutes, under 20 cents. Still the cheapest, most nutritious, most filling breakfast a person can make from pantry staples. Nothing has changed, except that we stopped teaching people this is an option. We stopped saying this is enough. It is enough. It has always been enough. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. Just one. The tomato gravy on biscuits, the fried mush, the cornmeal pancakes. Something from this list your grandmother made without thinking, and your generation forgot completely. Sit down at the table, not the counter, not over the sink. Set a place. Eat it slow. Because these were never consolation breakfasts. They were the real thing. The thing that made the rest of the day possible. Drop the one you are going to try in the comments. I want to know if the creamed chipped beef gets more love than the cornmeal mush. I want to know if anyone else's grandfather ate beans and cornbread before 6 in the morning and worked 12 hours anyway. Because these are not just recipes. They are proof that a person with almost nothing, 20 minutes and one cast iron skillet, could feed their family, get through the morning, and do it again tomorrow. That is not a small thing. That is everything.